Before anything else, drop a like right now because it helps the video reach way more Manchester City fans. Also, check you're subscribed with the bell turned on because the fixture run is tightening up, things behind the scenes are heating up, and a big decision is coming that could shift the direction of the season. And today's topic starts in a way every fan feels in their bones. When the schedule squeezes, the body pays the price. And Pep Guardiola, who rarely shows this kind of concern so openly, has basically held up a warning sign about Erling Haaland on the eve of the derby against Manchester United. It wasn't a vague hint. It wasn't, "We'll see how he is." It was a clear message that the number 9 is right on the physical edge and City need to manage it intelligently because you don't win a season with talent alone. You win it with planning, rotation, and timing. The point is simple, and at the same time heavy. Haaland has been carrying City's attack as the reference point almost every week. In many moments, he doesn't have a true mirror to share the role. That player who comes on and keeps the same weight of presence, the same threat running in behind, the same battles with center backs, the same constant danger inside the box. And when City fall into that familiar pattern of dominating possession and pinning opponents back, the striker doesn't rest just because the team are on top. Quite the opposite. He becomes the first defender, the first spark of the press, the man who triggers long runs, who drags markers around, who takes collisions with two center backs and still has to be fresh enough to finish first time when the ball finally arrives. And that, repeated week after week, becomes accumulated wear. It isn't just tiredness from one match, it's the kind of fatigue that stays hidden until the body shows clearer signs. Less explosion on a sprint, slower reactions to a ball in behind, that feeling he's always one step late compared to what we know he can deliver. Haaland is a machine, but even a machine needs maintenance. City are heading into a massive run of fixtures, and the derby against Manchester United lands right at this critical point in the calendar. A derby isn't a game you play at half speed. It demands maximum intensity, total focus, and, above all, an attack capable of turning a half chance into a goal. And when Pep talks about Haaland's physical condition now, he's talking about what truly matters. How to keep the main goal threat decisive without burning out the player who carries the team's reference point up front. A recent example made this even clearer. In the League Cup semi-final first leg against Newcastle, City showed two faces at once. On one hand, efficiency and personality to win a big match. On the other, a snapshot of an attack that, even when it works, still asks Haaland to do the heavy lifting almost without a break at the tip of the spear. And it was also a match that shone a light on names brought in to give the squad another kind of energy, like Antoine Semenyo and Ryan Christie, who swung the scoreline and helped build an important advantage. But even in a winning scenario, the Haaland topic came roaring back after the final whistle. Pep didn't dodge it. He went straight to it and spoke about Omar Marmoush as an urgent need, as a piece who has to return as soon as possible to ease the load. And when a manager uses genuinely worried language, admitting Haaland is exhausted, it changes the tone of the whole conversation. It stops being normal squad management and becomes a situation that needs solving. Because it isn't only about Haaland being tired, it's about City entering the stage of the season where the smallest details decide everything. A player even slightly below full physical level, in a team that depends on aggression in the press and precision in the box, can mean points slipping away in the Premier League, can mean a scare in a cup tie, can mean a big match where the ball arrives and the striker can't finish the way he normally would. And at a club living on tiny margins at the top, that's dangerous. That's why Omar Marmoush returning is treated as immediate relief. The idea is clear. With Marmoush available, Pep gains an option to rotate, to take minutes off Haaland, to change the attacking shape in certain matches, to control fatigue without losing threat. And City become less predictable, because it stops being that script where every opponent knows that no matter what happens, City will need Haaland for 90 minutes as the central striker. And there's another factor in that return. Marmoush had been away on international duty, which delayed his availability for the club. Now, with his Africa Cup of Nations run nearing its end, the expectation is that City finally get that piece back to reorganize the rotation. Egypt went out in a tight semi-final against Senegal and still have the third-place playoff against Nigeria. After that, the conversation shifts from when does he return to how does Pep use him from day one. The question hanging in the air is this: will City act quickly to balance Haaland's workload, or will they keep pushing the limit and risk losing him at the worst possible moment? Because there's a huge difference between managing minutes and putting out a fire. Managing minutes is taking Haaland off when matches are settled, not forcing him when the team are in control, giving him rest in specific games. Putting out a fire is when the player is already drained. Then every rest becomes an attempt to recover what's already been lost. And a derby against Manchester United is not an ideal place to test patience. It's a match that hits the squad's mindset, the atmosphere around the club, and confidence. If Haaland goes in not fully himself, the impact shows not only in the finishing, but in the press, the positioning, the way the team pins the opponent back. City need to be ruthless in the final third, and Haaland's presence is central to that. At the same time, forcing an exhausted player through a run of maximum intensity matches is asking for trouble. That's why Pep, by raising the alarm publicly, is also sending a message to the board and to the dressing room. The season demands support options, rotation solutions, and a plan to keep standards high until the end. Fans sometimes only see Sunday's match. Pep is seeing the whole month, the whole half season, and what can happen if a key player goes down. And then there's a second layer to all of this. When Pep talks about workload and needing pieces, he's also talking about the market and squad building. Not just one return, but a City that monitor opportunities, look for the right profile, and understand that even with a strong team, there's always a piece that can raise the level, add depth, and make sure the machine doesn't stop when the calendar tightens. So while the concern around Haaland grows before the derby, City's background work keeps moving. The directors are looking at names, possibilities, moves that complement the squad after a period of market observation where Marc Guéhi appeared as a target, and now other profiles begin to enter the radar with real force, especially those who look moldable for Guardiola's style. Players who arrive and slot into the idea of controlling, pressing, circulating, then accelerating at the right moment. And once you understand that logic, you can see it's not about signing for the sake of it. It's about choosing a player with specific traits, someone who doesn't arrive to be another body, but arrives to raise the options, add variations, and keep intensity when the team need it most. This backroom logic becomes even more interesting when you connect the puzzle pieces. On one side, Pep openly says Haaland is being asked for too much and the squad need alternatives so they don't break the most decisive attacker. On the other, the club are scanning the market with the same thinking behind recent moves. Find players ready to compete, but also with room to grow inside Pep's model, the type who don't need an endless adaptation period to be useful. And that's where the theme that grew after the Marc Guéhi conversations comes in. Even if that center-back situation is complicated, with heavy competition and negotiations that are never simple when other giants are watching, the message is obvious. City aren't standing still. City are monitoring, evaluating, and planning. And as always, with a club this size, one window can turn into a domino effect. You go for one piece, read the landscape, adjust your route, and accelerate towards another opportunity that actually fits the squad design. The key is, this season doesn't have to be perfect to end up special. And supporters feel that. There have been matches that didn't click. Moments where the team looked more vulnerable than the usual City standard, but when you look at the bigger picture, the reality is the club are alive on all the fronts that matter. They're close to a cup final, they've progressed in knockout competitions, and they remain firmly in the fight for Champions League places in the Premier League. And when City are in this position, nobody can pretend they don't know the script. This squad have proved more than once they can grow when pressure rises. That's why, when news breaks that the club are seriously interested in Alex Scott from Bournemouth, it can't be treated like a small rumor. It's the kind of name that matches City's pattern for several reasons, and the report pointing to that interest reinforces what fans learn over time. City don't only target ready-made stars, City target fit. They target tools. They target versatility. They target potential to become a key piece in a system that demands intelligence and execution. Alex Scott is 22, and Bournemouth's situation makes everything tougher on paper. A long contract until 2028, importance to the team, and the classic scenario where the selling club have no need to rush. But negotiations aren't always about urgency. Sometimes they're about opportunity. If City see an opening and believe the player can jump levels under Pep, talks can move. And what's striking is how it links with what City have just experienced with Antoine Semenyo. The similarity starts with the path, another Bournemouth standout entering the radar of big clubs, and then comes the heavy part. Because when it isn't just one club interested, the price rises, the race heats up, and the decision becomes a convincing battle. Alongside City, other clubs are watching Scott closely, like Aston Villa, Newcastle, and even rivals tracking him. That changes the board because it turns the player into a market target, and when he becomes a target, City have to decide whether they want to compete or wait for another opportunity. So what exactly gives Alex Scott that Guardiola look? First, mobility. He isn't a rigid midfielder locked into one role. He's played different jobs in midfield, popped up in different zones, and, when needed, adapted to a wider position. For a coach obsessed with controlling spaces, that's gold. Because City's midfield isn't just about pretty passes. It's about occupying correctly, pressing properly, turning the ball at the perfect moment, and accelerating in a coordinated way when the window opens. Second, ball carrying under pressure. Pep values players who can receive while marked, open their body, drive forward a few meters, and force the opponent to break shape through fouls, chasing runs, and disorganization. A player who carries well doesn't do it just to run with it. He does it to attract pressure and create space for others. That's why the report highlights this as one of his key tools. Third, work without the ball. City don't survive with a midfielder who only creates. They need someone who joins the press, understands when to step in, when to close passing lanes, how to protect transitions, and when to anticipate. When a player shows defensive effort with intelligence, not just pointless running, he earns points with Pep. So when City watch a player like that, the message is, the club want more depth and quality in central areas to keep standards through the entire season, because Haaland's exhaustion doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from the whole structure, the volume of matches, the kind of matches, how aggressively City press, and how often games become battles. If the midfield sustains rotation better, if the team can control with more variations, if Pep has more pieces to turn to without losing intensity, the attack breathes and the striker doesn't have to live on the edge every week. And this is where it all connects. City don't look at Scott as an isolated name, but as part of a bigger engine. A strong squad isn't just a best starting 11. It's a squad that survives the schedule and keeps the same level when you change pieces. And when Pep feels the rotation is short in specific zones, he pushes for solutions. Sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's a returning player, sometimes it's a role tweak, and sometimes it's the market. And speaking of internal solutions, there's a topic that really hits supporters and has been at the center of recent conversations: the future in goal. Because at the same time, Pep talks about Haaland's workload and the club monitor technical profiles for midfield, the James Trafford situation has become a major debate, especially after changes in that position. With Gianluigi Donnarumma arriving as number 1, the hierarchy shifts. And with Stefan Ortega in a situation where a departure could happen at some point, Trafford's place in the plan takes on a different weight. He isn't the starter today, but he's very present in the long-term thinking. And when market noise links him to Premier League clubs and even teams abroad, fans naturally ask, will City keep him or let him go so he can play? Pep was clear and shut down any idea of an immediate exit. His message was about staying, trusting the goalkeeper, and treating Trafford as an important piece of the project. And that fits the harsh reality at the top level. In goal, there's only one spot. Even if the squad rotates in almost every other position, keepers rarely rotate constantly. So a young goalkeeper's career often becomes a test of patience, maturity, and picking the right moment. Pep was also honest about how tough that is. He praised him, said he would like to see Trafford at the club for many years, and stressed he has the qualities to play for a giant like Manchester City. But he also left what everyone knows hanging in the air. At the end of the season, everything will be assessed. Because if the goalkeeper grows, takes his chances, and looks secure when he plays, he becomes a real future plan, even as a long-term successor when the starter's cycle eventually changes. But if minutes are almost non-existent and the ambition to be a guaranteed number one grows louder, the player himself may feel he needs another path. City, from what's clear, want to control that process. They don't want to lose an asset they rate highly. They don't want to repeat the mistake of letting a talent go too early. And at the same time, they have to be fair to the player's career, because a goalkeeper needs matches to develop. Training at a huge club is brilliant, but real matches are what build resilience. So when you bring the three themes together, the picture becomes tightly linked and very revealing. First, the Haaland warning shows a City pushed by the calendar and forced to manage the body of their main finisher. Second, the monitoring of targets like Alex Scott shows a club thinking about depth, versatility, and fit to keep intensity and standards through the hardest stretch of the year. Third, the message on James Trafford shows City trying to balance present and future, holding on to a piece that could be valuable later, while understanding the brutal reality of the most unforgiving position in football. And in the middle of all of it is Pep Guardiola doing what he's always done, spotting problems before they become crises. When he says Haaland is exhausted, he isn't just sharing a feeling, he's pointing at a risk. When the club look at the market, they're looking for solutions before the gap appears. When he keeps Trafford, he's protecting a long-term plan, because champion clubs don't only think about the next match, they think about the next season, the next cycle, the future of the toughest position in the game. Now I want to hear from you. In your view, does Omar Marmoush's return really solve Haaland's workload, or does City still need more forward alternatives to avoid risk in the decisive run-in? And on Alex Scott, do you think it's worth fighting a heavy market battle for a young, versatile midfielder for Pep's system? And finally, should Trafford stay and grow patiently at City, or does his career need immediate minutes elsewhere? If you enjoyed the video, drop a like right now because it helps the channel massively. And don't forget to subscribe and turn the bell on so you don't miss any Manchester City updates, because the next few days promise big news, strong decisions, and chapters that could change the course of the season.